Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear my voice loud and clear. So let's start this session. And the title that we have chosen is Demystifying the Cellular Technology Landscape. And the reason for this is because we are all facing a lot of news, new technologies, new use cases, changes from the point of view of the operators, which technology they are going to deploy, which they are going to phase out, depending on the region, etc. So I hope that this session today could put in perspective several of these aspects, helping you to understand where the market is going and which is the best technology and devices to adopt for your new solutions in the IoT landscape. I will check your questions, if any, and if I'm able to answer immediately, no problem. Otherwise, I will try to collect them for the end, leaving 10 minutes before the end of the hour. So let's start. This is the agenda we put together with Rutronik. And as I said, I want to touch a little bit the deployment status in IoT in Europe, that is our region, but also saying something about what's happening worldwide. Talking about different use cases and technologies, with a clear focus, of course, on LTE-M and Narrowband-IoT, that are the two trending topics in the last, let me say, 24 months. And I would like to connect this discussion also to the 5G evolution, because there are aspects that are in common, or anyway there is an evolution towards it. After this technical introduction, I would like to show you our portfolio and then a summary before the Q&A. So let's start with this first slide. That is full of information, in this case from IDC. I don't want, you can read on your own, I don't want to enter in the details of each and every number, but for sure there are some keywords that are definitely true. We can argue and discuss on the numbers depending on the different analyses that we read, but definitely it is true that IoT is the prime driver for the digital transformation for enterprises, and as well the investment in IoT is the engine for the digital transformation, with a clear focus on connectivity and intelligence at the edge. And this is what we see, what customers are asking us, and the way in which we are tailoring our roadmap, not only for devices, but for all the other solutions that we are offering. Sorry. Another aspect that I would like to comment on this slide, since we are in EMEA, that you can see the yellow market share compared to Asia Pacific and America. It's true that the market, this is the less is less compared to the other two big regions, in particular where, for example, in US 4G has already a big traction, enabling a lot of new solutions in the market. But I would like to stress your attention on the fact that EMEA is the one with the highest CAGR. So we have to leverage altogether this and know that we have a lot of potential business in the future in this market. I also want to show you something about what happened last year, because these are data that I have taken from the GCF website that gives a little bit the understanding of how the market is evolving. First of all, let me clarify for those of you that are not aware that GCF is not just a certification that is popular in Europe, but is a global standard and valid, recognized in all the other countries. And this information that you see in this slide are related to all the wireless devices in the world. So not only industrial IoT, but also consumer devices. In fact, in the pie chart, you can see mobile phones that are, of course, the majority. But what is relevant to know is that it was the first time last year that more single-mode devices incorporated the LTE, more than any other technology. And by single mode, I mean GSM only, or 3G only, or 4G only. So it was the first time that 4G got the lead in terms of adoption in these new devices that have been certified last year. And if we look instead at the features, carrier aggregation is already in 49% of the LTE devices certified, and it was only 7% the year before. So this gives the understanding of how fast the market is growing. In this case, if we talk about carrier aggregation, of course, I'm talking about high-end devices with high throughput. And VoLTE, so Voice over LTE, is becoming relevant for the majority of smartphones. We will see later how this is becoming relevant also for IoT, but of course, this information here is for the consumer industry. We can see a start of decline of new certifications for 3G or 2G devices, but this is expected because this is a global statistics. We know how 2G and 3G in US do not have traction anymore. Not to say that, for example, 2G is dead, or as in Australia, for example. And the other relevant information that I put in red is the first time of 3GPP LPWA devices certified. And Telit contributed to this statistics with the NE866 and the NL865 that are two of our Narrowband-IoT solutions. So, having said that, this is a slide that probably some of you may have seen already from us. It's very simple, in my opinion, because it summarizes all the drivers and pillars that are beyond this evolution. In particular, the evolution that is driving all the news and the changes in the IoT, and in particular on low power wide area devices. So of course, we're talking about devices that do not need a lot of throughput. We are talking about devices that are requiring very low power consumption. Coverage is very important because if one day in the future there will not be GSM anymore, of course we have to expect a new technology that is providing at least the same level of coverage, but we know how the new release 13 technologies and beyond are even better than that. Of course, it is required a certain level of scalability in order to design properly the solutions, and a clear focus on the cost, because to enable this massive adoption of IoT, we need solutions that are competitive. And as it was mentioned at the beginning in the first slide, security is one of the key topics for the IoT of today, but in particular of the future, with the complexity of the services and the new solutions that we are going to have. Of course, interoperability is a must, because we are not talking about a closed world. We are not talking about the deployment of solutions that are not able to interact with the others, and therefore everything new must be able to coexist in the same market, in the field, in the same network of the legacy technologies. So both backward and forward compatibility and interoperability is really a must. If we look at the evolution of the LPWA market, let's say that is not really something new, even if till a couple of years ago, maybe most of us did not even know the meaning of the acronym LPWA. Actually, this is a story that started back in in 2000 with the first proprietary and private networks. Then you have heard for sure the upcoming technologies in the unlicensed spectrum, such as LoRa, Sigfox, and other alternative protocols. And we could date this event around 2015. And of course, there was a reaction of the licensed world, so the 3GPP standard that in 2017 presented to the world the new LTE-M and Narrowband-IoT solution. So only at this point we can start talking about an inflection point and traction of the new technologies. Then, for sure, at the end we will have an evolution and an integration with the 5G new radio. As I just said in the previous slide, there must be a backward compatibility. So I will reiterate the message later on in the session, but the idea is that 5G is not something new and different, but it is something where naturally the technologies are evolving. This is also a slide that probably is pretty popular, at least in terms of content. But since we are talking about demystifying the cellular landscape, I thought it was important to repeat some basic concepts. So when we talk about LTE Cat M1, we talk about a standard that was defined a long time ago, even if not used at the beginning, with the 3GPP release 8, and pushed in the market starting from the North American operators, because it was the first move towards a lower end, at least in terms of price of solutions, but still a normal LTE, simply with the difference of the throughput that has been decreased to 5 megabit per second in uplink and 10 in downlink, with full mobility, capable of support VoLTE, and requiring 2 antennas for MIMO, even if we know that in some cases it's possible to get a waiver. But then, with the definition of the new standard, with the release 13, that by the way is called LTE Advanced Pro, not to be confused with LTE Advanced in the sense of high throughput. LTE Advanced Pro is the name of the standard that is comprehensive of the definition of the features for the higher categories, and also all the features that are peculiar of these two new standards. So Cat M1 is the other official way of describing the LTE-M. Is a natural evolution of LTE, an additional downgrade in a way from Cat 1, with a lower throughput, below the 500 kilobits per second, but requiring one antenna only, so a simpler architecture, also a cheaper architecture from the point of view of your end devices, still supporting full mobility, not supporting voice at the beginning, but with the upgrade of release 14, they have defined the possibility to support VoLTE also on Cat M1, and I would like to remind you that you may have seen a press release from Telit when in Mobile World Congress this year we have successfully demonstrated this feature together with Ericsson, and having a voice call over LTE-M with a pretty good quality, even if the standard, also to keep costs down, is adopted by everybody in half-duplex mode. And then we have the Narrowband-IoT that is the low-end standard in the license spectrum. So really designed to support basic application, not requiring voice, not requiring mobility, not requiring a lot of throughput. In fact, the maximum we have 250 kilobits per second. Also in this case, one antenna. There are, as it was for Cat M1, as it is for Cat M1, new power-saving mode, such as the PSM and the EDRX. And the only reason for which I put the comment, some concerns, close to the feature photo, is not because it's a Telit concern, it's a concern of some customers or adopter of the technology, because for such devices, in case of battery-powered operations with limited throughput, very limited throughput, maybe the procedure could take longer. But not to say that this is not possible. This is absolutely supported also by our devices. So, in a nutshell, LPWA is designed for massive IoT. It is not designed for high-speed or low-latency devices. It is designed to support the use cases of large numbers of low data rate infrequently transmitting devices. So in this chart, you can see some icons that are demonstrating some examples of applications depending on the throughput, and definitely LPWA is on the left-hand side, while with LTE Cat 1 we can start having applications that are sending maybe some low-quality video also. I mean, it's the throughput that is more than enough for some streaming, at least of images, and then of course the high speed of LTE. Actually, this chart is stopping at 600 megabit plus. In fact, we will see later when we will talk about LTE Gigabit how we already have a product in the portfolio that is breaking the barrier of the gigabit per second. This is something that should be known by everybody. It's the chart showing how the market is evolving in US, for example. As I told you, I don't want to talk only about EMEA, and it is pretty clear that the trend there is different. It is driven by the two major MNOs, and we know how they already planned the 2G shutdown in the case of AT&T, even if T-Mobile is still offering the service. Then we don't have yet a written statement on the end of new activation and the 3G sunset, but most likely we can put the milestones as where you see them in the chart, with an horizon by the end of 2020. Same for Verizon when we talk about their CDMA and e-video technology, and already a clear move to LTE Cat 3 and 4 at the real beginning of the LTE evolution. Then an adoption of LTE Cat 1 when the operators pushed in this direction, as I said before. But now, if the use cases of the applications allows it, a clear move to Cat M1 and Narrowband-IoT in perspective when they will adopt, because we know that there is a different approach. US started first with Cat M1, and apart from T-Mobile, later on they will go to Narrowband. In Europe, we have seen a different trend. But in particular, in Europe, the point is that 2G is still relevant for a long time. And we have only the official announcement, for example, by Swisscom, that is declaring since some time already in a press release the shutdown of their 2G network. Let's see if they are really committing to this milestone. We have started to see some official announcement of 3G shutdown instead by Telenor or by Vodafone in the Netherlands by the same date. But more in general, let's say that for sure 2G has a longer life cycle than 3G, and this is why I put dotted arrows that are migrating to 4G, because we don't have the same pressure. Also because of the fragmentation of our region with different operators in different countries, and because the LTE coverage is not at the same level of the 2G. But this is happening. This is really happening. Operators are investing in this direction, and we can start seeing the first solutions in LTE for IoT as well that are ramping up in volumes. Of course, solutions with fallback because there is no confidence yet to go massively on LTE only. unless the region is not limited and flat with full coverage everywhere. And for VoLTE, also for the reasons that I just described of fragmentation, there is not yet a massive adoption, but we are working for the implementation on all the new devices because this is the trend for the future. And I would put for that a milestone in 2019 in order to have a real usage of VoLTE in IoT as well. Let me skip this just to gain some time, just a few numbers on the global status, but this is public information that you can find in the GSA reports that are publicly available on their website. And I guess you will receive a copy of these slides, so maybe you can consult them. This instead is updated to February, so a few months ago, and in my opinion it is interesting because it shows on one side the investment. As I said before, the operators are investing a lot of money in the new technologies. So you can see how basically in all the relevant markets where there is a relevant business for IoT, there is an investment already in progress, I would say, for both the technologies, M1 and Narrowband-IoT. In some other cases, there is a clear preference for narrowband, but in the long run, my estimation is that all the operators will support both the technologies. And on the right-hand side, you can see which are the networks that are already launched by type. So there are cases in which you can see both of them, and cases in which there is a preference, or for M1, as it happened at the beginning in US, or for Narrowband-IoT, as it happened at the beginning in Europe. This is another slide where you can see different operators with different colors depending on their choices. But in case of dedicated questions, feel free to contact your Rutronik account, and then in case we can support with all the background information that are relevant for your business. When it comes to EMEA, let me spend a few words again on LTE-M. Just to clarify what I just said. Initially, the macro distinction was USA, M1, EMEA, narrowband, mainly because of the big push that Vodafone and Deutsche Telekom did in the market since, I would say, the Mobile World Congress of 2016. So, 17. But as it was, in my opinion, possible to expect, in reality, we start to see how both the operators and the end users realize the need for M1 for all the applications that are requiring or voice or full mobility or both. And I wanted to tell you this information because it's more easy to find also on the web the information on the national deployment and rollout of the Narrowband IoT technology is a bit less easy to find information on M1 in Europe. But I can tell you that this is coming, and this is why we have product for that as well. Of course, the pressure is less relevant than in US because we still have 2G that is providing the features that I just mentioned. But it's important to start evaluating the technology, in particular if you expect that your devices stay in the field beyond 2025, because at that point you might not have 2G coverage anymore. So better to be ready at the right time with the right technology. Another reason for which I wanted to tell you a bit more about Cat M is because with the adoption of these new technologies, it is possible to design devices, so starting from our modules and then reflected in your devices, that are for the first time in the industry truly global, in the sense that with the new silicons and the new front end for the radio, it is really possible to have the support for all the relevant bands in the different countries in order to have with one hardware a device that is suitable for the different regions. And here you can see how, for example, these are the bands supported by our global offering with EMEA antenna. You have bands that are okay for North America, some others that are okay for Asia Pacific. The green ones are those that are relevant for you in EMEA, because 8 and 20 is the typical combination to go everywhere with Narrowband-IoT, and 3 and 20 is the typical combination to support M1 with the operators that are using it. So really, the first time when we can find a device like that. In the past, it was not physically not possible to squeeze all the power amplifiers and the filters and the duplexers in the same module. So I really think that if you have a deployment that is not only local but with the ambition of being global, it's the right time to look into this. This is a chart that is instead summarizing some examples of migration that could happen. So, for example, if you had or those that in the past had applications in 2G and 3G only, using mobility, voice, etc., maybe some of them already moved to LTE Cat 1 or Cat 4, that were the solutions available in the market already last year, pretty well supported by all the operators. And I put also the fallback into G for the reason that I explained before on the coverage. On the other side, there could be devices with longer life cycles that were based on the same technology and maybe are willing to move to Cat M1 by the end of this year, when the technology is starting to be relevant, for sure in United States with nationwide coverage, and starting the first pilot in Europe as well. If instead the application is very cost sensitive, if it is data only, if it is stationary, if the throughput is very limited, and the battery power is a key factor, for sure those applications, if connected to the cellular network, were 2G, and maybe in the future they could be Narrowband-IoT, or someone might go in a different direction, in particular for new design, choosing alternative technologies. But if we remain on cellular, for sure the natural migration for this kind of solutions is 2G to Narrowband-IoT. And if you wait a little bit more, probably you will also skip all the intermediate technologies, because it doesn't make sense to have intermediate designs and certifications. Last but not least, there could be applications that are based on proprietary technologies, but willing to move to the cellular standard technology with the newest LPWA standards. If we look at the different LTE technologies in this case, so from the higher categories, 6, 9, or even higher, or Cat 4, that is pretty popular already in the market, or Cat 1, or the two new LTE-M and Narrowband, we see how we can differentiate the different verticals and use cases. For sure, there are cases in which there is an overlap, and you can find, for example, metering both in Narrowband-IoT and in Cat M1, because in this case it depends on the requirement of the pilot, of the project, of the deployment that you are going to face. Maybe in Germany there are some restriction of the regulation and you are forced to go to Cat M1 because you need more throughput, but if you have a water meter in another country, maybe you can use Narrowband. For the same reason, you can see security with VoLTE on Cat 1, but for sure there are applications that are requiring higher throughput for security, and so therefore you could see the same segment also in others. So there is not one technology that fits all, but the idea is to tell you how, at least at high level, we can start differentiating the different verticals. And even if in the past this was more, let's say, generic, in the future more and more we will see specialized technologies for each and every vertical. Also because on top of that, we can deploy dedicated services. So which is the Telit offering in LPWA? The offering is based on the well-known form factors that we have in the portfolio that you can find with the help of Rutronik available. And so if on one side we have the flagship, as we call it, that is the 910 form factor, that is the most complete size in which we have designed all the possible variants with all the possible technologies. And now we have designed a MIN-10 and an EN10 as well. Or we can offer, if you have, for example, designs on the 865 form factor, that is our bestseller in 2G. Also in this case, you can find multi-mode solutions or Narrowband-IoT dedicated. And then there is the smallest one, that is the 866, where we have a Narrowband-IoT offering as well. Let me also spend a few words on the software aspects, because up to now we just discussed hardware features, band configuration, form factors, where the market is going with one technology or the other. But let's say that in general, if we were doing modules since long time, and then at a certain point everybody realized that it was important to add added value services on top, the next step is try to really merge everything together and allow me to call this concept 2.0 in the sense that in particular with focus on the newest LPWA technology, Cat M and Narrowband-IoT, we believe that it's important to go in a direction where a device is embedding all the relevant features, such as the latest M2M protocol stack that is becoming a de facto standard in the industry, that every operator is expecting us to support, us and you at the end of the day to support, the possibility of device management, the possibility of having an application development environment like AppZone integrated in the device, the possibility of having embedding connectivity, and all these things together in order to allow really an IoT system in a module with a very easy possibility to configure, or even better, zero-touch configuration, not only low-touch configuration, cloud-enabled and then embedding the connectivity. So this is really a way that will help you in streamlining the process and also gaining, in my opinion, some advantage in the time to market and in the simplification of how we run the operations as of today. If we talk about evolution, as I anticipated at the real beginning, we cannot get rid of 5G. Everybody is talking about 5G. My message is don't worry about 5G, in the sense that it's a natural evolution. The first impact is on the high broadband applications. If we talk about massive IoT in 5G, we believe this is a 2025 story, that, by the way, in coincidence of the phase out gradually of 2G by that time. But the other interesting aspect is that in this slide we can see how everything is in a way going in the same direction, not only because it is designed from left to right, but because we have to think about 5G as a big umbrella that is embracing and covering different aspects from the high end to the low end. And what we are designing today and that you are integrating today, for example, with Cat M and Narrowband, will find a natural evolution into 5G, because these are standards that will be nominated as the candidate, that are already nominated as the candidate to represent the 5G IoT technology in the future. And since we just discussed about evolution of the standards, let me go back 1 second. Before I mentioned that these new low-end technologies have been defined with the release 13, so it was back in 2016. Last year, there was the completion already of the 14 that represents an improvement of what was defined already. And with the release 15, we start to see the first 5G work item to be really defined as a standard. Why I'm saying that? Because we are getting questions about release 14, and my answer to that is that, first of all, it takes at least 1 year from the definition of the standard to the real deployment. And the proof of that is that release 13 was defined mid of 16. We are mid of 18, and we start to see the first network in the field, and not even a nationwide. So the fact that 14 was defined last year, first of all, must not be considered as a disruptive change. It's a natural evolution. There are some new features like the one that I'm listing here. So some improvements in terms of throughput or for the VoLTE, as I said at the real beginning. But if your applications is fine with what has been defined in release 13 and you're already doing a design, don't worry, you can stay with that. And we are adding to our portfolio for devices that face the market next year, their counterpart in 14 that are not replacing the existing one. They are completing and integrating the portfolio. And here I also put a teasing message because before I talked about the 3 form factors that we have available today, but the teasing information is that we are also introducing a very attractive and small global product compliant to release 14 by next year. So let's try to go to the end of the webinar because otherwise I will consume all my time. And since I just told you something about 5G, let me just reiterate the concept a little bit. So if we discussed about the fragmented market so far, in terms of technology, in terms of complexity, in understanding which is the right technology for the right vertical. As I said, there is not one that is fitting the purpose for all the possible cases. But 5G, it will really be a kind of homogeneous environment where you can find on one side features that are enabling the massive IoT. I put a reference of smart cities because smart cities are the clear example of applications where you need a lot of sensors, battery powered, stay in the field for a long time, and 100,000 devices per cell with a very deep coverage. So this is one part. On the other side, we will see for the first time also the support of the so-called mission critical, and the difference between massive IoT and mission critical that are in a way the 2 major aspects where we can split, let's say, the 5G story. But in reality, I was explaining even better in this side how the pillars are 3. So on one side, the massive content, so everything that is related to the need of exchanging a lot of data, even beyond gigabit per second. And then in the center, I put the use case of the massive control for ultra reliable and critical communications. So everything that is related to low latency, but also to the reliability of the communication. And then what for us in the IoT world is more familiar, the massive MTC, so deployment of a lot of devices that are more simple, that are maybe working best effort because they are not critical, but that must stay in the field for a lot of time, that are not requiring throughput and so on. So the reason for which I'm telling you this is because if the left massive content pillar is the first that is relevant for 5G now. When you hear that at the Winter Olympics in Korea, they did the first demo on 5G, this was actually related to broadband communications. For us, it's not something that is impacting today. But anyway, the LPWA that I described at the beginning of the webinar is paving a path to 5G as well, because you can see how in the right-hand side of the slide we find the same concept. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Good. Just checking. So I mentioned the massive content. Allow me to spend a few words at this point on LTE Gigabit, because we spent half an hour talking about low end, but since we are demystifying the cellular landscape, let's also try to explain this. So if 5G will come soon with features for the high throughput, we don't have to forget that in reality we have LTE Gigabit existing already today. So it's not yet 5G, it's still 4G, but it's really providing a 5G seamless experience, because with the adoption of features like the one in the chart, like 2056 QAM modulation, higher end of MIMO, so multiple input and multiple output for the antenna. And I take the opportunity of answering one of the questions that came before. SISO means a single input, single output. In this case, MIMO means multiple input, multiple output. And carrier aggregation. If you remember at the beginning, I told you that in GCF there were a lot of new devices supporting carrier aggregations. And here you can also see how many operators are investing in this direction. Of course, this is driven by the consumer industry, all the handset devices that we have with us, allowing us to browse on Facebook and streaming and sharing content at high speed. But it is relevant also for IoT, for all the routers and gateways industry that have not to wait the first real 5G chips to be integrated, but they can really have this kind of experience with the solutions that we can offer on LTE Gigabit. And this is a description. Let me go quick on this. You will be able to read it on your own on how the releases that I mentioned before of 3GPP for the low end are also supporting and defining a cumulative set of features that are allowing the increase of the throughput. And by the way, you can find online a recording of a webinar that I did especially for the LTE Gigabit paving the way to 5G. So in case you are interested, you can easily find it on our website. This is pretty technical concept, but just to complete, the message is that in the future, in the same network, there will be a coexistence via the technique of network slicing of the different use cases and technologies at the same time. So the massive content, the massive control, and the massive sensing that I described before are, in this case, represented as different slices that are coexisting on top of the 5G core network. Okay, I don't want to enter too much in the technicalities, also because maybe it's not so relevant. But just to give you an idea of how all the technologists and experts that are working in the standardization body are really putting a lot of effort in preparing the background for the new evolution that is coming. That is not a revolution, so we don't have to be scared about it. Completing with the last two slides, so to wrap up, what we said is that LPWA is enabling a migration for sure from 2G and 3G based IoT solutions. And it is expanding the addressable market, because also applications that maybe till yesterday were not even connected to the wireless network, they can be from today and forward. For sure, the technology will be supported by the end of the next decade and beyond, for the reason that I just told you. LPWA will not disappear with the upcoming 5G, but everything will be merged together. So 5G will incorporate the LPWA attributes, but not only, there will be also the support for the mission critical use cases. And last but not least, LTE Gigabit is now and offers a seamless 5G experience. If we talk about low end, we said that Cat M1 is a reality already in US with nationwide coverage, and is starting to become relevant also in Europe. Narrowband-IoT is for sure coming. Someone could say that it is in delay. In my opinion, this was predictable, because maybe the expectation was set too high, but there is a physical time to allow the implementation of the standard and the deployment in the field. For sure, APAC, in particular China, is more active than us in Narrowband-IoT for their domestic market, but we start seeing some traction here as well. It is not a hype. Maybe we have to look at it from a different perspective, in the sense that new services will be also offered by the operators. Maybe solutions that were not connected yesterday, they will be connected tomorrow, but not to send data every hour, maybe to send data only once in their lifetime, but with some interesting services on top of that. This is why we have to take into consideration the new technologies. Then, of course, there are the unlicensed technologies that were early to market because they came before, so they got some traction in advance. There are pros and cons. I'm not here to convince you about what is good or not, one or the other. In fact, we have solutions for that as well. So it's really a matter of working with your advisors and understanding what is best for your deployments. Your takeaway, if you allow me to call it in this way, from this 1 hour discussion, is that GSM still represents relevant volume in Europe and in Asia Pacific for the coming years. WCDMA, so 3G, is still available in all the regions except from North America, but it has a shorter life expectation compared to GSM. And even if GSM and 3G still offer good coverage in Europe, and they may be considered for some local deployments, I really encourage you to consider them for new designs, in particular when you are facing new projects with a global need, or if your life cycle is higher than 7 years, because it means that you are going beyond 2025, and really you can arrive at the threshold of coverage also for the legacy technologies. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm really giving you suggestions based on the information that I have so far. We can help with solutions that are now available on Cat M1, on Narrowband, also on LoRaWAN, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi, just to complete the LPWA ecosystem, and we are putting a lot of effort on it. Not only, we have also the other part of the portfolio that is important for the higher categories, and the LTE Gigabit that I described before.